What's up, Space Pirates? This is your Admiral, the deliciously dank Dr. Disaster, and one of the most amusing things about a game release that was intended for the modern audience is watching all the people out there who really want it to succeed make a shitload of excuses for it. Ultimately, their defense of the game boils down to one thing though. They want those of us who are paying attention to take their medicine and stop noticing things.
Noticinol is an FDA-approved drug that helps people afflicted by chronic noticing. It works by suppressing the part of your brain responsible for critical thinking.
And what they really want us to stop noticing is this, of course, the Steam charts for South of Midnight, where the game hasn't gone any higher than about 1,400 concurrent players on Steam. All week long, I've heard from people who want this game to succeed telling me to just wait for the weekend, because of course, the weekend after a game launches is always when we see it at its peak. But the weekend is here, folks, and that player count ain't getting any bigger. And I can about imagine what the modern audience's response is to seeing these numbers. But the most interesting defense of South of Midnight that I have heard wasn't actually an excuse, but a question. One fella asked me, and it seemed like it was in good faith, but he asked me what kind of numbers South of Midnight needed to see on Steam in order to be considered a success. And I didn't want to dive into that question in a comment section. I felt it deserved an in-depth answer, so we are going to dig into that. But the short version summary is that South of Midnight needed numbers at a higher rate than this right here for the game to have a chance. I guess this is what happens when the audience you court is people like this. Alright, me hearties, make sure you hit the like button on this video in order to drive away the algorithm monster, share the video with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet, and don't forget to give me a follow over on X, where I keep a list of games lousy with woke shit pinned to my account at all times for your reference. My handle on that platform is Dr. Disaster 1. But anyhow, let's dive into the numbers behind South of Midnight and see why this thing is definitively considered a flop. First of all, let's consider the budget for what South of Midnight is. Compulsion is one of those studios that wasn't considered a AAA developer, but now that Microsoft has scooped them up, it was announced that South of Midnight is their first AAA release, which basically just means that they can spend a lot more money. These days, the absolute bare minimum spend on a AAA game is somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 million. So let's assume that they got by with that bare minimum $50 million number. Now, in order to make back $50 million, typically a studio needs to sell around 1 million units. The math behind that works out to this. These days, your average new game costs $70, but the studio doesn't get the full $70. The platform which sold it, whether that be Steam, the Xbox store, a retail store, or whatever, they get a cut of the sale. That number averages out to be about 25% of the game's price, which leaves a studio making 75% of whatever their game sells for. Off of a $70 game, that would be $52.50. Therefore, 1 million copies sold typically gets a studio a little over $50 million. However, South of Midnight is not selling at $70. This game sells for $40. So, Compulsion gets to take home 75% of that figure, which is $30. This means the company would need to sell around 1,700,000 copies in order to break even. So, the reason that a lot of us are calling this game a flop isn't just because the South of Midnight concurrent player count is low on Steam. It's because that tells us the game hasn't sold very many copies. And in fact, if we look here at VG Analytics, which is generally the most accurate of the analytics firms who track Steam numbers and make estimates, but if we look at their estimate, we can see that they think the game sold around 17,000 copies on Steam thus far. If we multiply that number by the $30 that Compulsion makes on each sale, you've got a little over $500,000 that they've made. Now, it's possible that VG Analytics isn't completely accurate here, but they won't be that far off either. If you doubled their estimate, they'd still only have made $1 million on this game, which cost them an estimated $50 million to make. You'd literally have to 100 times VG's estimate in order to get them to $50 million. And sure, the game is on sale on the Xbox as well, but I'll betcha that the Steam sales numbers exceed the Xbox sales numbers. After all, there are many, many more people that play games on Steam than on Xbox. But even if that's not the case, even if on the Xbox they sold 2, 3, or even 4 times as much, they are still massively in the hole. And considering that the game's release is pretty much over by now, the sales are gonna dry up. They aren't gonna be closing the gap very fast at all. Most people who buy a game do so in the first week or so after launch. This leaves Compulsion with only one hope of making any kind of money, and that is Game Pass. The game released on that service on launch, and it's true that we don't know for sure how much a studio makes for being on that service, but one thing I can pretty much guarantee you is that they won't make $49 million for being available on Game Pass, and that is roughly what they'd need in order to be operating not in the red. Any way that you slice it, this game is a massive flop. So, in order to answer that question, how many concurrent players does a game need to see on Steam to be a success? Well, a game like this one probably wanted to see somewhere between 30 and 60,000 concurrent players at its peak in order to have a chance at making back the money they spent on it. But now that we are deep into the launch weekend of the game, obviously those figures just aren't happening. But I'm gonna leave it there. Drop your contempt for this sort of game into the comment section below, and we will talk there. Thanks for watching, me hearties. If you haven't already, your Admiral is inviting you to subscribe to the channel and become a part of the crew. Life as a space pirate may not be glamorous, but there's always plenty of booty.